General Cameron, we've not seen the order yet, but you're under the understanding that you're going to win yesterday's argument. Is that correct?
Well, let me just say, I don't want to speak prematurely about the order, but certainly the judge has indicated that he is going to rule to certainly enjoin some of the executive orders that have been issued by the governor. Again, won't speak prematurely about it, but it looks like the constitutional rights of our citizens and the law here in Kentucky is going to be upheld.
Are you putting Kentuckians in danger? That's what Governor Beshear has suggested by your actions.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into a back and forth with the governor. I certainly respect him and the responsibility that he has, along with President Trump and our county judge executives and mayors, to make sure that we're getting it right as it relates to the public health. I certainly encourage people to wear masks. I certainly recognize the responsibility to be a good neighbor and social distance. But as General Barr noted a few weeks ago, even in the midst of a pandemic, you cannot suspend the Constitution. And so I agree with that sentiment. As the chief legal officer, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're upholding our laws. I think we're striking the right balance here in Kentucky. I've also noted that from the very beginning, we have encouraged the governor to work with our office to make sure that his orders are complying with state law and the Constitution. He's turned us down time and time again. And you've seen everyday Kentuckians. We've joined the majority of these lawsuits with everyday Kentuckians who have expressed concern about the constitutionality of some of these orders.
But if you say it's about constitutionality and not about masks, there are people who are confused and say Daniel Cameron just doesn't think people should wear masks. Is that true?
No, I've encouraged people to wear masks. I certainly think it's a part of the public health solution to this pandemic.
But does by fighting the executive orders, does that confuse people?
I don't think it, what we've been standing up for is the constitutional rights and making sure that those orders, I'll remind you that the executive order actually was issued as a regulation and has gone through the appropriate process. What our challenges have been as it relates to other executive orders, look, you look at the unemployment claims here in the Commonwealth, we're over 1 million unemployment claims. I was told based on testimony yesterday that maybe 43% of our daycares here in Kentucky might have to close by November. Dr. Stack yesterday in testimony said the orders have been broad in their scope and duration. And so I think there are general concern about some of these executive orders. I'll remind you also
but just because they're broad in scope doesn't mean that they're unconstitutional, does it?
Well, several judges, state and federal judges, have made the determination independently of one another that the orders have been unconstitutional. You recognize at least 2 federal judges, one appointed by President Obama and then one appointed by George W. Bush, came to independent conclusions that one of his orders was unconstitutional. As
we look at the scope of what the effort was yesterday, is everything scratched? All these executive orders about mask requirements and limitations on restaurants and schools and bars, is that all just scratched and then left up to individual people to try to enforce their own rules?
Well, keep in mind that there's still avenues for the governor to issue some of these rules as it relates to public health. So 211, KRS 211, 212, and 214 actually prescribe rules set out for our public health officials and CHFS to put in place rules that will help combat this pandemic. That is still available. Our whole goal here has been to make sure the governor gets it right as it relates to the public health and striking the balance with our citizens' rights.
Are you getting it right by taking up this fight?
Well, look, my responsibility is to make sure as the chief legal officer that we are abiding by the Constitution and the laws here in Kentucky. It's not a question about what my, how this impacts me personally. My responsibility and oath is to protect our constitutional rights here in Kentucky.
We've seen on social media a lot. We've heard in the news. Why is the Attorney General focusing on masks when he's got the breonna-Taylor case in front of him? Do you have time for both?
Well, we are doing everything in this office. I remind you that we continue to look at price gouging complaints and allegations that are made here in this office. We've got a strong team working on the breonna-Taylor investigation. I recognize that that hasn't happened. A resolution hasn't come as quickly as people would like, but we are working diligently on all fronts.
What do you think of those people being charged with felonies having been arrested on your lawn the other day?
Well, I'm told just within the last few minutes, I think County Attorney O'Connell has come out and said that those charges as it relates to the felony are not staying. I think he's dropped those charges.
Do you think they should have been charged with a felony?
Well, look, LMPD ultimately made that decision. I've respected the process. I respect the decision that Mr. O'Connell made, and I respect the process.
Were they right to come to your house to protest?
Well, they were there to, as they noted, escalate the situation. We're not going to be deterred in this office. We've got a responsibility to Ms. Taylor, to all those involved, to make sure that we get this matter right. It's a fact-intensive investigation. We are doing everything we possibly can to get to the truth, as I mentioned to you the last time we spoke.
How close are you to making a determination on whether charges are going to be filed against any of those officers?
Well, I don't want to get into specifics of the investigation, but we are working very hard. I've got a strong team looking at this. You know, one of the things that I think people fail to realize is that we didn't have to take this case. When initially the local prosecutor, Tom Wine, was conflicted out of it, we could have farmed it out to someone else. I made the decision to take this case because of how important it is that we get it right. We've got the resources in this office to make sure that we gather up all the information, all the facts. We certainly got the investigation from the Public Integrity Unit, but we're undertaking an independent investigation because it's so incredibly important that we get this right. I've made that commitment to Kentuckians. I think that's what everyone deserves, and we are going to get to the truth of this case.
Personally, how do you look at the case? Do you look at the case personally?
Well, I certainly think, you know, anybody that is, you know, looked at the landscape across this country, you know, recognizes the importance of getting it right in this particular matter. It's owed to everyone involved. It's owed to Kentuckians that we get to the bottom and get to the truth, and we certainly will do that.
What do you make of the people who've made remarks critical of you and looking at this case, questioning whether you can be reliable on the case, and making some of them have been racial comments and suggestions about you as a human being, unable to follow the law and do this case correctly?
Well, you know, I put blinders on. When it relates to my position and role as the chief law enforcement officer here in Kentucky, a team of dedicated prosecutors and investigators are looking at this. We put blinders on as it relates to any of the outside criticism that we might get. At the end of the day, you recognize that in a free society, there's going to be criticism in public life. I understand that. I accept that. We will not be deterred from getting to the truth of this matter. Again, recognize the passions that are involved in this case, and that is why it's so incredibly important that we get to the truth at the end of the day.
Are you only investigating the officers, or are you potentially investigating anyone else at the department or Mayor Beshear in their handling of this?
Well, won't get into the specifics of the investigation, but we are looking at every part of this matter. I'll remind you that we're also working in conjunction with our federal partners, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're looking at state claims, they're looking at the federal claims, and we are going to do a thorough review and investigation of this matter.
Last question for you, and because I know you're short on time. Within the last month, you became engaged, and some of those photos were shared by celebrities and others who were making comments about you and your fiance and your families and things of that nature. Is it fair that your fiance be brought into this, or did you see any of those statements and some of those stories that were on national media about your engagement and questioning whether you can go off and have an engagement party and not work on the Breonna-Taylor case?
Well, I'm not going to get into, obviously I'm very honored and proud to be engaged, but I'm not going to get into any sort of back and forth with folks. They obviously have their opinions and they've expressed it. All I can do in this role is be mindful of the way that I conduct myself and understand that, again, in public life there will be criticism, but I'm proud to be engaged and honored. You know, for me, what is ultimately important is that I found a Proverbs 31 woman, and that's what is important to me as somebody of faith. But I'm not going to get into any commentary that's been made by others.
All right, and as we leave, the last critical comment we've seen over the last few days is Daniel Cameron's only suing Andy Beshear because he has higher political aspirations. Is that true?
No, look, there's no political affiliation with the Constitution. I'm here to defend that and to protect the rights of our citizens. I am committed to this job. I recognize the importance of having somebody in the Attorney General's role that is not afraid to defend our constitutional rights on behalf of all citizens, and that's what I've endeavored to do. Again, there will be criticism. I recognize that, but I also recognize the importance of making sure we stand up for Kentuckians and our rights.